The unlikely fugitive. Mira Chen was unremarkable in every conceivable way, and that was precisely her greatest weapon. Average height, average build, utterly forgettable features that seemed designed for anonymity. If the galaxy's most advanced species had any concept of what made humans truly dangerous, they would have recognized this quality immediately, but they didn't. The Galactic Consortium considered humans a footnote, a curious but ultimately insignificant species from a backwater solar system. Humans had been granted limited interstellar travel privileges barely 30 years ago, permitted to fill the menial roles no evolved species would touch. Maintenance workers, cargo handlers, food service operators, the biological equivalents of outdated machinery, kept around until proper automation could be implemented. Mira had spent 7 years as a maintenance technician on the consortium's deep space relay stations, fixing environmental systems so primitive that most species wouldn't deign to learn their operations. Her personnel file featured a spotless record of mediocre evaluations, performs adequately, meets basic standards, requires minimal supervision. She was, by all official metrics, entirely unremarkable, which made her the perfect vessel for what she was about to unleash. The relay station Epsilon 9 orbited an unremarkable brown dwarf star at the edge of what the consortium designated civilized space. Its primary function was to process and route communication signals across 17 sectors, serving as a vital link in the vast network that kept the galaxy's dominant powers connected. The station's quantum core, a processing hub the size of a small Earth building, contained temporary copies of nearly every transmission sent through this quadrant. Mira's shift had just begun, her gray jumpsuit bearing the yellow shoulder patch that signified maintenance personnel. The patch was deliberately designed to make the wearer instantly identifiable and simultaneously dismissible. No consortium official would make eye contact with a yellow patch if they could avoid it. Recalibration of Junction 47 Alpha complete, she murmured into her comm unit, her voice projecting the precise tenor of someone completing their 10,000th routine task. Acknowledged technician, came the board response from the Ultheri supervisor several decks above. Proceed to Junction 48. Mira smiled faintly as she unclipped a small device from her utility belt. To an observer, it might have appeared to be a standard diagnostic tool, one of dozens carried by maintenance personnel. It wasn't. 7 years of planning had led to this moment. 7 years of memorizing security protocols. 7 years of mapping blind spots in surveillance systems. 7 years of observing the hierarchical weaknesses in the galaxy's most sophisticated communication network. She slipped the device into a maintenance port, tucked beneath a panel where routine diagnostic equipment would be connected. An unremarkable action performed countless times by countless technicians. The difference was that her device contained an algorithm that would systematically duplicate and export the station's entire communication cache. Billions of transmissions, diplomatic exchanges, military orders, and corporate secrets to receivers hidden throughout human settlements across 17 systems. The upload began silently, indistinguishable from normal diagnostic processes. Mira continued her maintenance rounds, each movement deliberate and unmemorable. 4 hours later, she completed her shift and returned to her cramped quarters. The device remained in place, still transferring data at rates that would have astonished the consortium's security experts had they detected it. They didn't detect it. Not that day, not the next. 3 days later, Mira was midway through a routine coolant system inspection when the station's alert system activated. Red emergency lighting bathed the corridors as security protocols initiated station-wide lockdown. All personnel remain at current locations, announced Station Director Vreel, his multi-tone voice vibrating with an emotion Mira had never heard from an Ultheri before. Something like, "Panic. Security teams are conducting an emergency inspection. Comply with all directives immediately." Mira leaned against a bulkhead, her expression a careful study in confused concern. The same expression worn by every other maintenance worker on the station. Inside, she was counting down. The first data packages had reached their destinations. Within hours, the bounty was announced. 1 trillion consortium credits for information leading to the identification and capture of whoever had breached Epsilon 9's quantum core. It was the largest bounty ever offered in galactic history, large enough to purchase a small star system. By the following day, the bounty had a name attached: Mira Chen. She was on a transport shuttle when her face appeared on every communication screen in the galaxy. The unremarkable maintenance technician was suddenly the most recognizable and hunted, being in known space. The Drakkari bounty hunter found her 3 days later on a refueling station orbiting Proxima Centauri. 7 feet of scaled muscle and cybernetic enhancement, he cornered her in a dimly lit maintenance corridor, the kind of place human workers were expected to be. Mira Chen, the Drakkari rumbled, his translator struggling with the unfamiliar human name. You will surrender and be remanded to consortium custody. Mira looked up at the imposing figure blocking her escape route. Her expression remained neutral, almost bored. What did they tell you about me? She asked. The question seemed to confuse the hunter momentarily. You are the human who infiltrated and compromised the Epsilon 9 relay station, releasing classified consortium data across multiple sectors. Mira nodded thoughtfully. And did they tell you what was in that data? That is irrelevant, To. They told you I was dangerous, Mira interrupted. But they didn't tell you why, did they? The Drakkari's hand moved toward the neural disruptor at his hip, a weapon designed to incapacitate without killing, preserving the bounty value. They didn't tell you, Mira continued, because they don't understand it themselves. She raised her hand, revealing a small device that looked remarkably similar to the station's standard-issue maintenance tools. Humans aren't dangerous because we're strong or fast or technologically advanced. We're dangerous because we see systems differently. She pressed a button on the device. Throughout the refueling station, every electronic system simultaneously reset. Artificial gravity fluctuated. Emergency lighting flashed erratically. Atmosphere regulation it kept just enough to make the Drakkari's respiratory membranes flutter uncomfortably. What have you? The hunter began, his cybernetic enhancements suddenly flooding his system with contradictory data. 7 years, Mira said, her voice soft but clear against the background of blaring alarms. That's how long I've been placing adaptation modules in every consortium facility I've maintained. Little adjustments to environmental systems, communication relays, power distribution networks. Nothing remarkable. Nothing worth noting in security logs. Just small changes that maintenance supervisors would approve without a second thought. The Drakkari's cybernetic eye was rapidly shifting through spectrum analyses, trying to compensate for what appeared to be sensory hallucinations. His enhanced limbs began moving with decreased coordination as conflicting command signals reached their processors. The consortium believes in centralized control, Mira continued, stepping calmly around the increasingly disoriented hunter. They build redundancies, fail-safes, security protocols, all designed to maintain that control. But humans, we evolved in chaos. We thrive in adaptability. The station's systems were now cycling through program variations. Temperature, lighting, atmospheric pressure. Nothing dangerous, but everything disorienting, especially to species whose evolutionary path had never required adapting to rapidly changing conditions. The data I released wasn't just about the consortium's secrets, Mira said. It was about their fundamental misunderstanding of the universe. They'd been systematically suppressing emerging species, manipulating technological development, enforcing a galactic hierarchy based on their definition of intelligence. The Drakkari was on one knee now, his cybernetic systems trying desperately to recalibrate to environmental changes that didn't follow any predictable pattern. Did you know, Mira asked conversationally, that 17 species have been driven to extinction because they developed technological approaches that didn't align with consortium methodologies? Did you know that human colonies have been deliberately sabotaged when our innovations didn't follow their predetermined development paths? She knelt beside the struggling hunter, her unremarkable face now animated with an intensity that transformed her features. "The consortium doesn't fear me because I stole their secrets," she whispered. "They fear me because I showed everyone else the truth. They're not the pinnacle of evolution. They're just the ones who've been rigging the game the longest." The Dracary's translation implant was struggling to keep up, but he understood enough. "You cannot win against the consortium," he managed. Mira smiled, and for the first time, the hunter saw what the consortium truly feared, not anger or revenge, but the uniquely human capacity for amused defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. "I already have," she replied, "because I'm not fighting alone." Throughout human settlements across 17 systems, ordinary maintenance workers, cargo handlers, and service personnel were activating similar systems. Not in coordination, there was no central plan to detect and disrupt, but in a chaotic, adaptive pattern that reflected humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage: our ability to innovate independently while working toward a common goal. As she walked away from the incapacitated hunter, Mira's comm unit buzzed with an incoming transmission, the first response from the consortium's High Council, demanding her immediate surrender. Mira laughed as she read their increasingly desperate offers: amnesty, wealth, a position of influence within the consortium hierarchy. They still didn't understand. This wasn't about personal gain or individual power. It was about rewriting the rules of a game that had been rigged for millennia. The most wanted human in the galaxy stepped onto a small transport vessel, her unremarkable features once again arranged in an expression of calm competence, the face of someone who knew exactly where they were going. The hunt was just beginning, and Mira Chen was enjoying every minute of it. Turning the tables. The first coordinated attempt to capture Mira Chen occurred in the Arcturus system, where the consortium deployed its most sophisticated tracking technology, a network of quantum-entangled sensors designed to detect the unique molecular signature of any being that had been previously cataloged. Every human granted interstellar travel privileges was cataloged. What the consortium failed to understand was that their elaborate technological solutions were fundamentally vulnerable to humanity's most potent weapon: creative improvisation. "Target signature detected in Sector 7. Announced the Thelan commander of the consortium's elite capture squad. "Isolation fields activating." The squad, 12 of the galaxy's most lethal operatives, converged on an abandoned mining facility on Arcturus IV, their movements coordinated with mathematical precision. Each operative carried weapons calibrated specifically for human physiology, designed to incapacitate with minimal damage to preserve the bounty value. They found the molecular signature exactly where their sensors indicated, precisely replicated and distributed across 27 different locations within the facility. "Impossible," muttered the commander, his translucent appendages rippling with confusion. "Run diagnostic verification." "Sensors functioning within optimal parameters," reported his second. "The signature is simultaneously present in multiple locations." The commander hesitated, his species' highly logical mind struggling to process the contradictory data. In that moment of hesitation, the facility's environmental systems initiated protocols that no consortium engineer would have considered rational. Atmospheric composition began cycling through variations, nothing immediately lethal, but specifically calibrated to induce disorientation in the particular neural structures of each squad member's species. Lighting systems generated patterns that interfered with the visual processing centers of their specialized combat helmets. Communication channels remained open but subtly distorted, creating millisecond delays that made coordinated action increasingly difficult. "This is unprecedented," the commander managed, his translator struggling to convey the concept properly. "Actually," came a voice over the facility's communication system, "it's textbook human tactics. Your species calls it asymmetric warfare. We just call it fighting smart." The voice was Mira's, though she was nowhere near Arcturus IV. Her message had been recorded and programmed to play when the facility's systems detected the specific energy signatures of consortium capture technology. By now, you've realized your sensors are detecting my molecular signature in multiple locations. The recording continued conversationally. What you don't yet understand is why. Your scientists designed those sensors to detect what they consider unique identifiers, specific combinations of elements that, according to consortium biological theory, cannot be replicated. Throughout the facility, the elite squad was encountering increasing difficulty maintaining formation as environmental variables continued shifting unpredictably. The problem with consortium biological theory, Mira's recording explained, is that it's based on assumptions about what's possible. Humans don't operate on assumptions. We experiment. We try things that shouldn't work. 7 months ago, a human biochemist on Europa discovered that molecular signatures could be synthetically replicated using compounds that your sensors can't distinguish from the original. The commander ordered an emergency evacuation, but the facility's transit systems were no longer responding to consortium override commands. You might be wondering why I'm telling you this. Mira's voice continued, almost sympathetic. It's because the consortium's leadership won't. They'll tell you your equipment malfunctioned. They'll tell you I employed technologies stolen from more advanced species. They won't admit that a human scientist working with primitive equipment discovered something their most advanced researchers missed. The squad members were now experiencing the early symptoms of neurosensory overload, a non-lethal but intensely disorienting condition resulting from their combat system's inability to compensate for the facility's constantly changing environmental variables. I'm not broadcasting this message to taunt you, Mira assured them. I'm broadcasting it because you deserve to know what you're actually fighting against. The consortium has told you humans are dangerous because we're unpredictable. The truth is more specific. We're dangerous because we question fundamental assumptions. By the time consortium reinforcements arrived, the elite capture squad was found incapacitated but unharmed. The facility's systems had returned to normal operations, with no evidence of tampering. The only unusual element was that each squad member's personal data device contained complete copies of classified consortium directives, specifically those detailing how emerging species were to be controlled and limited. The bounty increased to 2 trillion credits. On Proxima Centauri VI, the primary human colony in that system, Ilara Nwosu stared at the transmission appearing on her secure terminal. As the lead cynobiologist at the colony's research facility, she had clearance to access certain restricted consortium databases, or at least the heavily edited versions the consortium permitted humans to see. What she was viewing now was different. Unfiltered. Raw. This can't be accurate, she whispered, scrolling through documentation of biological manipulation programs conducted on 17 developing species over the past 3 centuries. They've been systematically altering evolutionary paths. Not altering, came a voice from her doorway. Constraining. Ilara turned to find an unremarkable woman in standard colony clothing, the kind of person you'd pass 100 times without remembering. Mira Chin, Ilara breathed, instinctively glancing at the security monitors. They showed empty corridors. The monitors are showing a loop, Mira explained, entering the lab and closing the door behind her. Nothing elaborate, just enough to give us a few minutes. There's a 2 trillion credit bounty on you, Ilara said. 3 trillion as of this morning, actually, Mira corrected with a slight smile. The Drakari enclave added another trillion after what happened at Arcturus. Ilara gestured to her screen. Is this real? Have they really been restricting technological development across all emerging species? That's not even the most significant part, Mira replied, moving to the terminal and entering a complex sequence. New files appeared, detailed analyses of genetic manipulation programs, technological suppression initiatives, and carefully orchestrated accidents that had eliminated promising innovations across dozens of worlds. The consortium's founding species believe they've discovered the optimal path for biological and technological evolution. Mira explained. They're not malicious, exactly. They genuinely believe they're guiding younger species toward enlightenment by keeping them on this predetermined path. Deviation is seen as dangerous, potentially catastrophic for galactic stability. And humans deviate, Ilara concluded. Constantly. It's what we do best. Mira's expression grew serious. The problem is, we're not the only ones. 17 species have been driven to extinction because their evolutionary or technological paths didn't align with consortium models. Dozens more have had their development artificially constrained. Why are you showing me this? Why me? Because you're about to make a discovery that the consortium will attempt to suppress, Mira answered. Your research on adaptive xenobiological systems, it contradicts one of their fundamental assumptions about how complex biological organisms should function. Ilara's eyes widened. How could you possibly know about my research? I haven't published anything. Because 3 other xenobiologists on 3 different worlds made similar discoveries. All 3 laboratories experienced containment failures, resulting in complete data loss. Mira's voice was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. The consortium doesn't hate humanity, Dr. Mosu. They simply cannot comprehend biological systems that thrive on adaptation rather than stability. Outside the laboratory, alarms began to sound. It seemed their borrowed time was running short. What do you want from me? Ilara asked. Share your research, not just with human colonies, with every species. Broadcast it on every frequency through every network. Show them that biological systems can evolve along multiple successful paths. That's what you've been doing, Ilara realized. Not just exposing consortium secrets. You're creating a network of alternative knowledge. Mira nodded. The most effective way to change a system isn't to attack it directly. It's to create a more compelling alternative. The alarms grew louder. Security forces would arrive soon. They'll kill you if they find you here, Ilara warned. Mira's smile returned, that peculiar expression that combined absolute certainty with something almost like amusement. They've been trying, she said simply, but they're looking for what they expect to find, a threat that follows patterns they understand. She pressed a small device into Ilara's hand. When you're ready to share your research, use this. It will distribute your data through channels the consortium can't monitor or block. By the time security forces breached the laboratory doors, Mira Chen was gone. The monitors showed no record of her entry or exit. The only evidence of her presence was the revolutionary idea she had planted, the concept that knowledge could flow freely, that evolution could follow countless successful paths, that the galaxy might function without centralized control. The Consortium High Council convened an emergency session, their ancient chamber on the capital world of Illumina Prime, sealed with security measures that would have been considered excessive even during the genetic wars 3 centuries earlier. The situation continues to deteriorate, announced First Minister Vereen, his normally melodious voice strained with unprecedented stress. Human colonies are now openly sharing restricted technologies. 3 previously compliant species have demanded reclassification of their developmental status. The Drekari Enclave is questioning the validity of their ascension agreements. And still we cannot locate this human, added Minister Threll, practically spitting the word. Our most sophisticated tracking systems find nothing but false signatures and contradictory data. We have contained rebellious elements before, offered Minister Kaur, the oldest and traditionally most conservative member of the Council. We will adapt our approaches and restore order. You misunderstand the fundamental nature of the threat, came a new voice, calm, measured, and distinctly human. The ministers turned as one toward the center of their chamber, where a holographic projection had appeared without triggering any of their security protocols. The image showed an unremarkable human female in simple clothing. Mira Chen, First Minister Vereen identified, his voice a mixture of rage and disbelief. How have you breached this chamber's security? I haven't, the projection replied simply. Your security remains intact. I'm simply utilizing a communication method your systems don't recognize as communication. Impossible, Minister Threll declared. All methods of information transmission are cataloged and monitored. The projection of Mira seemed to find this genuinely amusing. "That assumption is precisely why we're having this conversation," she said. "The consortium believes it has identified all possible paths: biological, technological, communicative. You've constructed an elaborate system based on the premise that your understanding is complete. What do you want?" Demanded First Minister Varine. "Credits, political asylum, a position within the consortium hierarchy. Name your price to end this chaos." Mira's projection shook her head. "I want you to consider a possibility that has never occurred to the consortium in its 10,000 years of existence. You might be wrong." The chamber fell silent, not from outrage, but from the sheer incomprehensibility of the statement to beings who had never questioned their fundamental assumptions. "Evolution isn't a linear path toward a predetermined ideal," Mira continued. "It's an ongoing process of adaptation to changing environments. The same is true for technological and social development. By constraining emerging species to follow your predetermined path, you're not guiding them toward enlightenment. You're preventing them from discovering new solutions, new possibilities, new ways of existing that might surpass your understanding." "This is heresy," Minister Kor whispered. "No," Mira corrected gently. "It's science. Real science. The kind that questions its own assumptions and adapts to new evidence. The kind the consortium abandoned millennia ago when you decided you had discovered all fundamental truths." First Minister Varine had recovered his composure. "You cannot seriously believe that a single human, a maintenance technician, can challenge the accumulated wisdom of the galaxy's most advanced civilization." "I'm not challenging it alone," Mira replied. "I'm simply creating space for questions. The questions are doing the rest." Throughout the galaxy, those questions were indeed spreading. Not as a coordinated revolution. There was no central leadership to target and neutralize, but as countless individual moments of realization. Scientists questioning methodologies that had been handed down as immutable. Engineers exploring technological approaches the consortium had deemed inefficient. Philosophers revisiting concepts of governance and cooperation that operated without centralized control. "The bounty on your capture now stands at 5 trillion credits," Minister Threll stated, as though this fact might somehow impress the human. "You cannot hide forever." "I'm not hiding," Mira's projection replied with that same confounding smile. "I'm exactly where I've always been, working within the systems you built, finding the spaces between your assumptions. The reason you can't find me isn't because I'm employing sophisticated evasion techniques. It's because you're looking for what you expect to see." The projection began to fade, but Mira's voice remained clear. "The consortium has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years by convincing everyone, including yourselves, that there is only one correct path forward. I'm not trying to destroy that path. I'm simply showing everyone that infinite others exist." As her image disappeared completely, Mira's final words echoed through the ancient chamber. "And that, ministers, is why humans laugh in the face of impossible odds. Because we've never believed anything is truly impossible, just temporarily unexplored. Throughout human settlements across the galaxy, ordinary people, maintenance workers, researchers, colonists, continued asking questions, sharing information, exploring possibilities that the consortium had declared impossible or dangerous or inefficient. Not because they were following Mira Chen's instructions, but because questioning established limitations was fundamentally human. The most wanted being in the galaxy had never needed to hide. She had simply needed to show the galaxy a truth that the consortium couldn't comprehend. The most dangerous weapon humans possessed wasn't technology or strength or even unpredictability. It was our stubborn refusal to accept that any system, technological, biological, or social, was beyond reimagining. And that made Mira Chen smile.